is it?
It is the end. We did it. We figured it out here on this
We can give you the
podcast.
exact date,
We can
okay?
tell
So
you the time down to the minute.
2026, May 30th. That's it, right? No.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's time once again for another episode of your favorite Christian podcast, Questions and Almost Answers, with me, Matt, and Greg. We are respectively, the little pastor and the big pastor of Hampton Baptist Church. And we like to discuss difficult questions and almost come up with answers for them. And today we're going to be talking about a hot one, a hot topic. This is one that, Greg, I think comes up quite often from time to time. And people, I think, sometimes like to bring it up. Greg, can you talk about what is this? What are we talking about today?
Are current events fulfilling prophecies in the Bible? That's the question, right? And this,
Ooh.
like you said, does come up more and more often. And it's one that, like, if you'd asked me this 20 years ago, I would have been like 100% confident in all my answers. Yeah, I'm not there anymore. But I think we can come up with some pretty good ones that are that it doesn't matter what flavor of interpretation you have on on future events, that our answers can fit with that. I think if our answers only fit with one flavor, we're probably
Probably
um,
missing something.
yeah, probably overconfident.
Yeah. And I mean, when it comes to overconfidence, I feel like in this space of I read this verse and I can see a link into what this is happening. I think this is my off the cuff take, and I will adapt and change it if I recognize that it's wrong. Is I feel like nobody knows, like broadly, we can't actually know. I don't think. Can we?
Yeah, no, I so here's the ounce of humility that we have to have, maybe a pound of humility that we're in Canada, a kilogram
A kilogram.
of,
Greg,
of
he's
humility.
switching over already?
Yes.
No.
So 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 we need this humility when we look at prophecy, because when Jesus came the first time, there was like over 100 prophecies like that he was fulfilling, but nobody understood that till after he fulfilled it, right?
That's
So
right.
hindsight is like, oh wow, like look at Isaiah 53, like look at the detail, right? And it is incredible, but you see it after the fact. So
Mm,
so there's all kinds of prophecies about Jesus that still aren't fulfilled yet, and
that's
things
right.
that are going to take place, and people who are just unbelievably confident that they know exactly
I
how
figured it
and
out.
when.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a scary place to be, right? I think it's totally fine for us to have some educated guesses, some opinions, and to have a sense of the big picture framework. For example, all Christians everywhere should believe in the return of Jesus,
Yes, that's
right?
right.
But Jesus himself said he didn't know when it was going to happen, right?
Mm,
That actually brings up a whole other question we can deal with in another episode. But
right.
Jesus himself didn't know. We can get a general picture of what things are going to be like nearing his return. Um, but to know the exact details and things, like people think they know who the Antichrist is going to be, which
Mm,
maybe you've heard of that term, maybe you haven't. I don't know. I'm sure you have, Matt, but like we can't know those
we can't.
things, right? Um, but we can get some big picture concepts, and we should, right? Uh, Jesus gave this type of wording, like we can know the times and the seasons, but we can't know
Mm,
the exact day, right? So,
yeah,
in other words, we can get the big picture, but we're not going to get the fine details until after the fact.
that's right. This question is interesting I think for a couple reasons. I think it's important, like, how much do we outline like the current status of which we are, like globally, and like I think often when like large global political things and sometimes things even closer to home happen, uh, I've seen people be very quick to jump on the idea of, well, looks like it's the end, guys. Look, it's happening. There's this unrest that's happening. And so right now there is some unrest that's happening
Yeah.
in our neck of the woods.
Hmm.
And do we how much of that do we discuss, do you think?
Whatever you want to bring up, we can.
Uh, I don't think the question of this episode was not to give our thoughts or opinions on anything that's happening. But I'll I'll give my outline of what I understand is happening from my perspective as someone who doesn't stay closely connected to global news, because I find that often it just makes me stressed, and that's not the kind of life I want to live. But it's been hard to ignore some of the large things that have taken place. For example, the latest United States election, and different many people are frustrated with the policies and the words that are being used by the elected president, as well as the relationships that are being shifted and changed because of that high political change. For example, statements the president elect has used towards Canada, implying potential annexation, large government taxes on exports, and things, well, even very recently today, changing across the seas, with the president saying things towards Ukraine, and many different things with Israel and Gaza, and there's
Right.
a lot of stuff that
Right.
is freaky, is scary to see at a
Right.
very large level.
Yeah, and so just I don't know if there's anybody from the US side watching this, but just to give some perspective. First of all, this is not in any way political or saying
No,
whether he should or shouldn't be president or
no, because
should
he is
be
he is
vote. He
president.
is, right?
He
Like
is president.
and God's in control and all
That's
that
right.
other stuff. The reason why people outside the US and countries, especially in the West, can be um I guess kind of jittery about some of these moves is because since World War II, there's kind of been an establishment of certain ways that countries interact, and that was largely established, frankly, by the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And following certain rules to make sure that big countries don't take advantage of small countries, that every country can maintain their own sovereignty, that we don't bully each other, right? Like those type of things have been established, and really the Western world kind of fell in line behind the US leadership on these things. Um, and that could all still be intact,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah,
there's certain things being
100%.
said and certain actions being taken that puts that in jeopardy, right?
Mm,
And so uh, countries outside of the US don't know what the rules are anymore. Don't
mm,
don't know yeah, can we just like take over our neighbor nation now? Like, can we bully them? Can we be bullied? Is there consequences? Is there not? Who's our ally? Who's our enemy? Like, are
mm,
we on Ukraine's side or are we on Russia's side? Like those things we just don't know, right? And are we allowed to disagree? Are we not allowed
mm,
to disagree? Like all those things are in question. So I think that's part of this unrest that's there. Um, the other thing that goes along with this, and we're all probably victim of this in some way, is what I would call an industry of fear and anger.
that's huge.
Like our news media, it doesn't matter. Here's my pet peeve. Sometimes you talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I don't listen to mainstream media anymore. They're too biased." Well, newsflash, whoever you're watching on YouTube is just as biased, and they're going through and they're trying to figure out which videos succeeded and didn't succeed
That's
and
right.
what their audience wants to hear and doesn't want to hear. And they are putting out whatever will make you the most afraid and the most willing to come back and click again, right?
Mm,
They are not unbiased. Neither is CNN, neither is Fox. And you miss this part, Matt, just because of your age. When I was growing
yeah.
up, there was a thing called like the 6 o'clock news. And yeah, and the news, they could have a tiny bit of a slant in what they covered or what they didn't cover, but it was largely just giving
The
the facts of the
information of
day.
what's happening.
Right. And sometimes at the end of those shows, they'd have like a minute or 2 minute commentary, right? Like it was a
Right.
little edgy, right? But the for those of you Canadians like Rex Murphy, like that type of thing, right at the end of the news. Again, Matt, you have no idea probably who that is.
No.
Um, but we don't have that anymore. We have networks that are running 24 hours a day,
Mm,
and 99% of it, or 95%, whatever percent, is just fear mongering. It's just trying to keep you engaged long enough to get their advertising revenue up,
yeah.
right? And and that is absolute manipulation.
I find
And
it's similar with social media.
yeah,
If I can steal the convo for a second,
yes,
but this is something that I've noticed as a young person who would go online often. You can't run from it, and it's exhausting. There's so much, and not just even large media outlets would be doing these things, but also people have recognized that, wait a second, I can get, like you said, like on YouTube, I can get more clicks if I
mhm,
say this thing trying to get people upset on purpose, because then it'll say that there's more engagement because people are arguing in my
yes,
comments. It's disgusting. It's
yeah,
foul
absolutely. And so that's happening for all age groups,
all the
all across this.
time.
Yeah, 24/7. It's just hitting us all the time. And we wonder why is our anxiety rates up and all that other stuff. Like this is a this is a big piece of it. Like think about how we used to live. Like we would go the majority of our day oblivious to what's going on in the world. And then at 6 o'clock you get this little snapshot. That's if you even watch the news. And it was just, oh, there was an earthquake here and there was an election here. And it was just more of the facts, right?
Mm.
Um, Now we're getting notifications all the time of videos. We're at least reading the headlines, right? And we're just constantly bombarded. And those, like, the titles of those videos are
Oh, they get
clickbait,
you.
right?
That's
They
how
are
they get you.
exactly. And so it's just an industry of fear and anger. And this actually, if we want to talk about fulfilling prophecies, this is actually a fulfillment of prophecy, right?
Mm.
Because Paul talked about that in the end times, there's going to be people that are, use the old King James for a second, but heaping to themselves teachers having itching ears. And that's a weird statement that just simply means the people giving the information, they are going to be only giving the information that the people want to hear.
Mm.
In other words, they're going to be studying their audience and
Yeah.
giving their audience what will keep them coming back.
Right.
Um,
And that's most certainly happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's a statement: if somebody just wants a quick answer and can click off, like here's the answer, right? Our current events, fulfilling prophecies in the Bible. Well, current events are in line with prophecies in the Bible, but
Mm.
not necessarily fulfilling them.
Mm.
In other
That's
words,
fascinating.
the things that are said in the Bible that are going to happen in the end times, yeah, we're seeing flavors of that all over the place. Absolutely. This idea of the industry of fear and anger, that's prophesied. In the book of Daniel, the prophecy that everybody should be talking about that nobody's talking about is Daniel talked about that in the end times there's going to be this increase in travel an increase in information, increase
Mm.
in knowledge and gaining in information. That is happening in our lifetime like no other time period, like exponentially so.
Mm.
Um, so we could look at all kinds of prophecies in the Bible and say, hey, this looks very similar, right?
This
Very
is in
similar.
line with it. Yeah.
That's right. Um, but that doesn't mean it's a fulfillment of it. Because what
Mm.
we think is crazy amount of travel now, what's it going to be like in 50 years,
Right.
right? Like maybe we're taking rockets and going to Mars, right?
Like if you went back and somebody read that passage and Ford Motors just created the automobile, right?
Exactly.
It would also be in line with that. And so we can't give it the stamp of, yep, we did it, we got there, on to the next prophecy that needs to be fulfilled. No.
That's right.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think is adding to the interest in this and I guess the anxiousness of it, like, are we getting to the end and all of that stuff, is we are definitely living in an unparalleled time of change. Like you mentioned some of the political changes and not to add fear, because that's not what I want to do here, but just something that is a reality that we're heading towards is we've gone through decades and decades of kind of certainty because US has been the world power, right? And um, everybody knows who you want to side with if you want things to go well. Well, China's moving up, right? And China's a very different um, political ideals, very different philosophies on how things could and should be done. Um, and I'm not arguing which is better and worse. I've got strong opinions, right?
We're not here to
But
talk
there,
about them today.
right. But we've got China moving up the food chain and other countries starting to fall in line behind them. So now you got Russia, you got countries in the Middle East and countries around the world kind of falling behind them. And you've got the countries that were falling behind the US are like, I don't know if the US likes us anymore, right? Like,
Mm.
should we be making different arrangements here? So you got all of that political uncertainty, but then there's the all of the changes with like AI, which is
Mm.
coming, which is like we don't even have a sweet clue how big this one's going to be.
Yeah.
Like this is like if you think the internet and computers and cars and all that was a big deal, they were like grains of sand compared to this massive boulder
Yeah.
that's going to hit us, and is starting to hit us. Robotics, like we are not decades away, we are years away from factories um, being run by humanoid robots, right?
Yeah.
And manufacturing shifting drastically, quantum computing, like all of this stuff is all hitting all together at once. And so that just again leads to this uncertainty, like what's it going to be like in the future?
That's right.
What's the economy going to be like? Is my job going to be relevant? Like all of this fear and uncertainty, all of a sudden people start thinking, is this the
Is
end?
this it?
Yeah. Um, so
So
is it?
it is the end. We did it. We figured it out here on this
We can give you the
podcast.
exact date,
We can
okay?
tell
So
you the time down to the minute.
2026, May 30th, that's it, right? No.
No, we can't.
Here's here's something that we should I think be calmed by.
Yeah,
Because as Christians, we are not to be motivated by fear.
never to be motivated by fear.
Matter of fact, fear and walking with Jesus, in a sense, are almost not compatible. John
That's
talks
right.
about this. Like, you can't, like, love and fear don't go together, and we are to be living in love, and perfect love casts out fear,
Yeah,
right? So, as Christians, the closer we're walking to Jesus, and the more we understand, Russia's not the big deal. China's not the big deal. The US is not the big deal. Canada's not the big deal. God is the big
God is
deal.
the big deal. There are larger powers than the powers we think
Yes.
are the biggest,
And God is accomplishing his eternal purposes perfectly before
despite.
AI and after
Yeah,
AI, right? Before cars and after cars,
that's
before
right.
airplanes and after airplanes, before the computer and after the computer. It doesn't matter. God is doing God's thing, and
Yeah,
it is good
it
and
is.
it is winning.
And it cannot lose.
That's right. And so that's what all of these prophecies in the Bible, they're not there to make us afraid.
No.
They're to put it put our hearts at ease to understand that no, even though there are legitimately bad things in the world, and there are still bad things to come, right?
Mm,
But there is greater good that is to come.
that's right.
And God is doing these amazing good things. And so that's where our heart needs to be drawn to. And when we feel ourselves getting afraid and angry and caught up in politics and like which country is the best and all that other stuff. No, no, no. Like as Christians, Paul puts this very frankly in the book of Philippians that we are citizens of heaven.
Yeah.
In other words, our allegiance is not to Canada.
No.
Like I know there's been this rise of national pride
Patriotism.
and
Yeah.
patriotism in Canada, and maybe rightfully so. Um, and but our true patriotism, our true allegiance and alliance needs to be with God and what God is doing, His kingdom,
Mm,
His way of operating. That's where we need to be patriotic. That's where
that's
we need
right.
to be aligned with. And um, if Canada disappears tomorrow,
It
that's okay.
does because God is
My
greater.
nation, right? My nation is going forward,
That's
right?
right.
It doesn't matter what my passport is.
Mm,
My God is the one I put my confidence in.
yeah.
And so as Christians, we need to see ourselves as citizens of heaven, right? Um, so here's where my brain went to, and you can tell me, Matt, if this is off base or not, but
I got you.
we've got all of these worries in the world about our economy, politics, all of that other stuff. We've got worries about our occupation. Will it still be there? All of those things, and we struggle to find hope for the future. Like things look bleak, things look
Yeah.
dark. But as Christians, as citizens of heaven, our economy is unshakable.
It
And in the
literally
Bi-
is.
right, and in the Bible, our economy is not in dollars and cents. It doesn't matter if it's the American dollar, the Canadian dollar, Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. Our currency is the fruit of the Spirit. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, goodness.
Yeah.
That is our economy. That's our currency.
Mm,
That's what we're to be laying up
yeah.
ahead for the future and investing in. These are the things.
Like I imagine what would it look like? What would it look like if we perfectly demonstrated this kind of love? If we relied on God and
Mm.
we showed this in little pockets and little communities that the the provincial and federal governments would notice that and maybe take a hint.
Yeah,
And this is what it looks like for people actually to be served. And so we can rely on God and do this.
yeah.
And so let's, despite
Mm.
the difficult things, and actually, this is my opinion alert. When there is uncertainty, we have more opportunity now to have that deep reliance on God and to include people in this upside down kingdom that is so
Mm.
opposite from what we would ever expect. Like, oh no, our currency needs to be strong and we need to have a strong connection to Canada. Those are not like you said, what we're fighting for. There's a
Mm,
kingdom that actually we wrestle with understanding that is
yeah,
completely opposite of how we act, and that's what we're fighting for.
right. Very well said. And our so when Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit, one of the things he says right afterwards, he says, "There's no law against these things."
You can do them, and no one's gonna get upset.
That's right. So you can be loving, you can be joyful, you can be patient, you can be kind, and you can get rich in those things,
That's right.
right? And nobody can take it away, and
That's
nobody can
right.
stop you. It doesn't matter how they're treating you, whatever. You can still be patient. You can
That's
still
right.
be kind. You can still be uh, good, right? Um, and so this is our economy that is unshakable. Um, and so every other currency will fail,
It
but
will.
this one will endure forever.
That's right.
So why not invest in the one that's God's kingdom that will last forever, right?
That's right.
Um, the other thing is our occupation as Christians is sharing the good news and being the good news. In other
Mm,
words, living it, living the transformation that God brings to his children and
mm.
sharing the news of Jesus and his transformation to the world, right?
And we have to
So,
deeply rely on God for that. Like don't get it twisted. Like you can go
mm,
out and do these things, but it's not like your little power. Like I'm going to bring Matt's version of God's kingdom. No, you really have to completely rely on
mm,
God, and He will use Matt and how Matt operates. But deep reliance, deep faith.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, you never are going solo in this,
No,
right? It's always a
good,
team effort.
good thing.
Yes. Um, by the way, just side topic, the going solo thing, that I'm not saying that you always go with God on this. I'm
Mm,
saying you go with God and his family on this.
yeah,
So living out the kingdom is a group effort.
it is.
And sharing that is a group effort. But that's could be a whole other episode. But again, our occupation is not so we can be unemployed and be employed in the kingdom,
That's right.
right? We can be in an industry that's dying, but be in an industry of giving life
Yeah,
at the same time because our occupation is secure as a child of God.
that's right.
And our hope is not in a government, which all governments fall, all governments fail,
That's
all
right.
companies go bankrupt, all
Yep.
industries change, and
Yep.
but our God is all powerful and he keeps his promises
Every time.
every time, and we will reign forever with him. So that's what we look forward to.
Sign me up. Like
Yeah.
that I think that's what we need to be so focused on. And that really outweighs any kind of fear, any kind of large political situation can bring.
Mm.
Like yeah. Can we guys, can we trust us please? like like I just I'm rambling now, but
Uh,
yeah.
here's maybe something to tie this part up. So here's a framework for us to think about all of this changes in the world, all of these things that seem to be fulfilling prophecies, or maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Um, the way Jesus presented things and the way it's talked about by Paul and Peter and John is that Jesus can return at any time.
Any moment.
So that means in every generation, see, the enemy of God doesn't know when this is going to happen. So the enemy of God has to be prepared in every generation for the return of Jesus. In other
Hmm.
words, the enemy has to be working behind the scenes to be getting his side ready
Yeah.
for a battle.
Yeah.
And and he does that. That's why all through history you see repeated like movements that seem to line up with prophecy, right? Because the enemy constantly has to be ready for when Jesus returns,
That's right.
because that's just before the return. If I understand scripture right, that's his moment to shine, right?
Mm.
So here's what we're told is as followers of Jesus, we are to be prepared for him to return at any moment.
That's right.
So so the enemy's doing his job because we can see it in the world.
We
The
certainly can.
question is, are we
We
doing
doing
our
our
job?
job.
Are
Yeah.
we ready? Are we living our life as if that return is real and as if we have this limited amount of time to live out God's kingdom and to share it?
Mm,
Are we actually doing that?
it's
And
huge.
that's what we need to be focused on. Let the enemy do what the enemy is going to do, but let's align ourselves with God and act and live like we're his allies, right?
Let's do it. And I think, well, let's do this right now,
Mhm.
like in our lives. Um,
Absolutely.
I know for me, one of the practices that I do that helps remind me of my reliance on God is prayer.
Mhm.
And it can just start like that. And that's that's what we need to rely on. We need to rely on God. And yeah,
Here's my I pray too. I probably I think everybody has different ways that they connect with God
of
more
course.
easily, right? And I think prayer is a big one. Reading scripture is a big one.
Mm,
The one that oftentimes we leave out that is actually, I think, my strong suit is meditation.
mm,
I spend significant time every day just thinking about the things of God, trying to process it and
that's right.
to make sure my life is ordered
In that
in
way.
alignment with it. Um, and I think we need those things. We need we need God's framework of thinking and being implanted in us. And
Yeah.
prayer is a big part of that. Reading is a big part of that, or listening, sometimes listening to things like this. Um, and just spending time not on social media, not in those other places. Maybe go for a walk without your phone and just think about the goodness of God. Think about
Mm,
how He keeps His promises, right? And think about what following Him would look like in your workplace. Like, take time to meditate too.
that's right.
Yeah, very good.
Let me see if I can summarize everything we've talked about. Are our current events fulfillments to biblical prophecy? They certainly seem like they're in line with them, though this is not something we need to be afraid about because there is an infinitely stronger power, God, who is ultimately always good, always keeps his promises. And he proved that through Jesus Christ. And so, since we have this hope, since we know of this goodness, we can now live in this world despite the difficult situations as reflections of Jesus, helping to bring about his kingdom, a place where love is shown and we are patient and we are kind. We follow a different currency, the fruit of the spirit, and we need to deeply rely on God to um, to help us as we pursue this, because who knows when Jesus could come back. But we need to be ready and we need to be building into this kingdom. If you have any other questions for us about any of these things, we would love to talk about them. So please write them down in the comments, or you can join our Facebook page and you can send us little messages too. There's a link down in the description to our church Facebook page. But Greg, do you have any other thoughts? I think this might be the we did
No,
it.
I think you nailed it. Good job summing things up.
Well, good job us for talking about it. We'll
There you
talk
go.
about the end times more another time, maybe, if we are so brave.
Maybe our next episode.
Maybe our next episode. But thank you so much for watching. This has been Questions and Almost Answers.